The night before she disappeared, Cassandra cut off her eyelashes. Easy as homework, Cassandra Clark takes a little pair of scissors out of her purse, little chrome fingernail scissors. She leans into the big mirror above the bathroom sink and looks at herself, her eyes half closed, and her mouth hanging open the way she puts on mascara. Cassandra braces one hand against the bathroom counter and uses the scissors to snip, each long black lash falling, settling, fluttering down to the sink drain. She doesn't even look at her mother reflected there, standing beside her in the mirror. That night, Mrs. Clark hears her slip out of bed while it's still dark. In the 1 hour when there's no traffic in the street, she goes naked to the living room with all the lights off. There's the rumble of springs inside the old sofa. There's the rasp and click of a cigarette lighter. Then a sigh, a whiff of cigarette smoke. After the sun's up, Cassandra's still there, sitting naked on the sofa with the curtains open and the cars going past, all her arms and legs bunched tight around her in the cold air. In one hand, she's got the cigarette, burned down to the filter, ashes on the sofa cushion beside her. She's awake and looking at the blank television screen, maybe looking at herself reflected there, naked in the black glass. Her hair looks lumpy with tangles from not combing. Her lipstick from 2 days ago, it's still smeared across her cheek. Her eyeshadow outlines the wrinkles around each eye. Her eyelashes gone, her green eyes looking dull and fake, because you never see her blink. Her mother asks, "Did you dream about it?" Mrs. Clark asks, "Does she want French toast?" Mrs. Clark turns on the wall heater and gets Cassandra's robe off the back of the bathroom door. Cassandra hugging herself in the cold sunshine, sitting knees together, her breasts are pushed up by her arms. Flakes of gray cigarette ash are scattered on top of each thigh. Flakes of gray ash settle into her pubic hair. Her feet twitch with tendons under the skin. Her feet flatten side by side on the polished wood floor. They're the only part of her not statue still. Mrs. Clark says, "Do you remember something?" Her mother says, "You had on your new black dress." She says, "The short one." Mrs. Clark goes to put the bathrobe around her daughter, tucking it up tight around her neck. She says, "It happened in the gallery, across from the antique store." Cassandra doesn't look away from her own dark reflection in the off television. She doesn't blink, and the bathrobe slips down, putting both of her breasts back out in the cold. And her mother says, "What did she see?" "I don't know," Cassandra says. She says, "I can't say." "Let me get my notes," Mrs. Clark tells her. She says, "I think I have this figured out." It's when she comes back from the bedroom, her thick brown folder of notes in one hand, the folder open so she can pick through it with the other hand. When she looks around the living room, Cassandra's gone. At that moment, Mrs. Clark's saying, "The way the Nightmare Box works is the front..." But Cassandra's not in the kitchen, nor in the bathroom. Cassandra's not in the basement. That's their whole house. She's not out in the backyard or on the stairs. Her bathrobe is still on the sofa. Her purse and shoes and coat, none of them are gone. Her suitcase is still on her bed, half packed. Only Cassandra is gone. At first, Cassandra said it was nothing. According to the notes, it was an art gallery opening. Then in Mrs. Clark's notes it says, "Random interval timer." Her notes say, "The man hung himself." It started on the night all the galleries opened their new shows, and downtown was crowded with people, everyone still dressed up from the office or school and holding hands. Medium young couples in dark clothes that wouldn't show the dirt from a taxi seat, wearing the good jewelry they couldn't wear on the subway, their teeth white as if they never used teeth for anything except to smile. They were all watching each other look at art before watching each other eat dinner. It's all in Mrs. Clark's notes. Cassandra had on her new black dress, the short one. That night, she wanted a long glass of white wine, just to hold it. She didn't dare lift the glass, because her dress was strapless, so she kept her arms down at each side, holding her elbows close in. This flexed some muscle across her chest, some new muscle she'd found playing basketball in school. It pushed her breasts so high her cleavage seemed to start at her throat. That dress, it was black and stitched with black sequins and beads. It was a crust of rough black glitter with her breasts pink and meaty inside, a hard black shell. Both her hands, the way her painted fingernails meshed together, they looked handcuffed around the stem of her wine glass. Her hair coiled and pinned up high. It was so heavy and thick. Strands and curls were coming undone, dangling, but she didn't dare reach up to fix it. Her bare shoulders, her hair coming apart, her high heels clenched the muscles of each leg, pushed her ass up, curving it out at the bottom of a long zipper. Her perfect lipstick mouth, no red smeared on the glass she didn't dare lift. Her eyes looking huge under long eyelashes. Her green eyes the only part of her moving in the crowded room. Standing and smiling in the center of an art gallery, she was the only woman you'd remember. Cassandra Clark, only 15 years old. This was less than a week before she disappeared, just 3 nights. Sitting now in the warm spot and ashes Cassandra left on the sofa, Mrs. Clark looks through the folder of notes. The gallery owner was talking to them and the people gathered around. Rand, her notes say. The owner's name was Rand. The gallery owner was showing them a box on 3 tall legs, a tripod. The box was black, the size of an old-time camera, the kind of camera where a man might stand behind, hunched under a sheet of black canvas to protect the glass plate coated with chemicals. The kind of Civil War camera that took your picture with a flash of gunpowder, a mushroom cloud of gray smoke that hurt your nose. When you first walked into the gallery, that's how it looked. This box on 3 legs. The box was painted black. Lacquered, the gallery owner said. It was lacquered black, waxed and smudged gray with fingerprints. The gallery owner was smiling down the stiff, strapless front of Cassandra's dress. He had a thin mustache, plucked and trimmed perfect as 2 eyebrows. He had a little devil's beard that made his chin look pointed. He wore a banker's blue suit and a single earring, too big, too fake bright to be anything but a real diamond. The box was fitted along every seam with complicated moldings, ridges, and grooves that made it look heavy as a bank vault. Every seam hidden under detail and thick paint. Like a little coffin, someone in the gallery said. A man with a ponytail, chewing gum. On each side of the box were brass handles. You had to hold them both, the gallery owner told them, to complete a circuit. If you wanted to make the box work right, you held both handles. You pressed your eye to the brass peephole in the front, your left eye, and you looked inside. Person after person, 100 people must have looked that night, but nothing happened. They held on and looked inside, but all they saw was their own eye reflected in the darkness behind the little glass lens. All they heard was a little sound, a clock ticking, slow as the drip, drip, drip from a leaky faucet. This little ticking from inside the smudged black painted box. The box felt sticky with its layer of grime. The gallery owner held up one finger. He taps his knuckle against the side of the box and says, "Some kind of random interval timer." It could run for a month, always ticking, or it could run for another hour. But the moment it stopped, that would be the moment to look inside. "Here," the gallery owner said. Rand said. And he tapped a little brass push button small as a doorbell on the side of the box. You hold the handles and you wait. When the ticking stops, he says, you look and push the button. On a little brass nameplate, a plate screwed to the top of the box, if you stood on tiptoes, you could read the Nightmare Box and the name Roland Whittier. The brass handles were green from people holding tight, waiting. The brass fitting around the peephole was tarnished with their breath. The black outsides were waxed with grease from their skin rubbing, pressed close. Holding the handles, you could feel it inside. The ticking. The timer. Steady and forever as a heartbeat. The moment it stopped, Rand said, the push button would trigger a flash of light inside. A single pulse of light. What people saw then, Rand didn't know. The box came from the closed antique shop across the street. There it had sat for 9 years and never stopped ticking. The man who owned it, the antiques dealer, he always told customers it might be broken, or it was a joke. For 9 years, the box sat ticking on a shelf until dust buried it. Until one day, the dealer's grandson found it, not ticking. The grandson was 19 years old, going to college to become a lawyer. This teenager without a hair on his chest. All day girls came into the shop to use their eyes on him. A good kid with a scholarship playing soccer, a bank account, and his own car. He had a summer job at the antique shop dusting. When he found the box, it was silent, ready and waiting. He took the handles. He pressed the button and looked inside. The antiques dealer found him, dust still smeared around his left eye, blinking. His eyes focused on nothing. He just sat in a pile of dust and cigarette butts he'd swept up on the floor. The grandson, he never went back to college. His car sat at the curb until the city towed it away. Every day after that, he sat in the street, outside the shop. 20 years old, and he sits on the curb all day, rain or shine. You ask him anything and he just laughs. That kid, by now, he should be a lawyer practicing law, but now you can go visit him in some fleabag hotel, public housing on Social Security for a complete mental depression. Not drugs even. Rand, the gallery owner, says, just a case of total crack up. You go visit this kid, and he sits on his bed all day, cockroaches crawling in and out of his clothes, his pant legs and shirt collar. Each fingernail and toenail is grown long and yellow as a pencil. You ask him anything. How's he doing? Is he eating? What did he see? And the kid still only laughs. Cockroaches moving around, lumps inside his shirt. His head circled with houseflies. Another morning, the antiques dealer comes in to open his shop and the dusty clutter is different. It could be someplace he's never been. Again, the box has stopped ticking. That always quiet countdown. And the nightmare box sits there, waiting for him to look. All morning, the dealer doesn't unlock the front door. People come and cup their hands against the window to peek inside, to look for something back in the shadows, for some reason why the shop isn't open. In that same way, the antiques dealer could have peeked inside the box, to see why, to know what happened. What would take the spirit out of a kid now 20 years old, a kid with everything to look forward to? All morning, the antiques dealer watches the box not tick. Instead of looking, the dealer scrubs the toilet bowl in the back. He hauls out a ladder and picks the dry, dead flies from each hanging light fixture. He polishes brass, oils wood. He sweats until his starched white shirt is soft with wrinkles. He does everything he hates. People from the neighborhood, his longtime customers, they come to the store and find the door locked. Maybe they knock, maybe they go away. The box waits to show him what for. It's going to be somebody he loves who looks inside. All his lifetime, this antiques dealer, he works hard. He finds good stock at a fair price. He carts it here and puts it on display. He wipes the dust from it. Most of his life he's been in this one store, and already he's going to estate sales and buying back the same lamps and tables and selling them for the second and third times, buying things from dead customers to sell to live ones. His shop just inhaling and exhaling the same stock. This same tide of chairs, tables, china dolls, beds, cabinets, little knickknacks coming in and going out. All morning the dealer's eyes keep coming back to the Nightmare Box. He does his bookkeeping. All day he fingers the 10-key adding machine, balancing accounts, totaling and comparing long columns of numbers, seeing the same stock, the same dressers and hat racks arrive and depart on paper. He makes coffee. He makes more coffee. He drinks coffee until the can of grounds is empty. He cleans until everything in the shop is just his reflection in buffed wood and clean glass, the smell of lemon and almond oil, the smell of his sweat. The box waits. He changes into a clean shirt. He combs his hair. He calls his wife and says how for years he's been hiding cash in a tin box under the spare tire in the trunk of their car. 40 years ago, when their daughter was born, the antiques dealer tells his wife he had an affair with some girl who used to come in on her lunchtime. He says he's sorry. He tells her not to hold dinner for him. He says he loves her. Next to the telephone, the box sits, not ticking. The next day, the police find him. His accounts balanced, his shop in perfect order. The antiques dealer's taken an orange extension cord and knotted it to the coat hook on his bathroom wall. In the tiled bathroom where any mess could be easy to clean up, he's knotted the cord around his neck and then just relaxed. He's sunk down, slumped against the wall. He's choked, dead, almost sitting on the tiled floor. On the display counter in the front of the store, the box is ticking again. This history, it's all in Tess Clark's thick folder of notes. It's then the box comes here, to Rand's art gallery. By then, it's kind of a legend. Rand tells the little crowd, the Nightmare Box. Across the street, the antique store is just a big painted room, empty behind its front window. It was right then, that night, Rand showing them the box, Cassandra's arms bunched in tight to hold that dress up. It was that moment somebody in the crowd said, "It stopped." The ticking. It had stopped. The crowd waited, listening to the quiet, their ears reaching out for any sound. And Rand said, "Be my guest." "Like this?" Cassandra said, and she gave Mrs. Clark the tall glass of white wine to hold. She lifted one hand to the brass handle on that side. She handed Rand her beaded little evening bag, her little clutch with her lipstick and emergency cash inside. "Am I doing this right?" she said, and lifted her other hand to the opposite handle. "Now," Rand said. Mrs. Clark stood there, the mother, a little helpless with a full glass of wine in each hand, watching, everything ready to spill or break. Rand cupped his hand against the back of Cassandra's neck, the bare skin above her spine, where only a soft curl of hair fluttered down, at the top of her long zippered ass. He pressed her so her neck arched, her chin coming up a little and her lips moving open. Holding her neck in one hand and her purse in the other, Rand told her, "Look inside." The box is quiet, silent the way a bomb might be the moment before it goes off, explodes. Cassandra opens up the left side of her face, her eyebrow held high, her eyelashes on that side trembling, thick with black mascara, her green eye wet and soft, something between solid and liquid. She puts her eye against the little glass, the darkness inside. The crowd around them, waiting. Rand still holding the back of her neck. One painted fingernail moves to the button, and Cassandra's face, pressed to the black wood of the box, she says, "Tell me when." The way you have to look inside, to make your face fit against the box, you have to turn your face a little to the right. You have to stoop a little, leaning too far forward. You have to hold both handles because this puts you off balance. Your weight, it has to rest against the box, pressing through your hands, balancing on your face. Cassandra's face against the black, complicated corners and angles of the old box, the way she might be kissing it, the trembling curls of her hair, the sparkling dangle of each bright earring. Her finger moves on the button, and the ticking starts again, faint and deep inside. What happens? Only Cassandra sees it. The random timer starts again for another week, another year, another hour. Her face stays there, pressed into the peephole until her shoulders sag. She stands, her arms still hanging down. Her shoulders go round and sloped. Blinking her eyes. Fast. Cassandra steps back and shakes her face a little, her eyes not meeting anyone else's eyes. Cassandra looks around at the floor, at people's feet, her lips shut tight. The stiff front of her dress bags forward, gapping out away from her breasts with no bra inside. She reaches out and pushes herself back from the box. She steps out of each high heel, standing flat-footed on the gallery floor, and the muscles in her legs disappear. The two rock-hard halves of her ass, they go soft. A mask of loose hair hangs in her face. If you're tall enough, you can see her nipples. Rand says, "Well?" He clears his throat, pushing breath out through a long sound of spit and snot, and says, "What did you see?" And, still not looking at anyone, her eyelashes still pointed at the floor, Cassandra reaches a hand up and plucks the earrings from each side of her head. Rand reaches to give her the little beaded purse, but Cassandra doesn't take it. Instead, she hands him her jewelry. Mrs. Clark says, "What happened?" And Cassandra says, "Can we go home?" They listen to the box tick. It's a couple days later she's cut off her eyelashes. She flopped a suitcase open across the foot of her bed and she started putting things in, shoes and socks and her underwear, then taking things out, packing and repacking. After she disappeared, the suitcase was still there, half full or half empty. Now all Mrs. Clark has are her notes, her thick folder full of notes about how the Nightmare Box must work. Somehow it must hypnotize you. It implants an image or an idea, a subliminal flash. It injects some message into your brain so deep you can't retrieve it. You can't resolve it. The box infects you this way. It makes everything you know wrong, useless. What's inside the box is some fact you can't unlearn, some new ideas you can't undiscover. Days after they went to the art gallery, now Cassandra's gone. On the third day, Mrs. Clark goes downtown, back to the gallery, her thick brown folder of notes tucked under one arm. The street door is unlocked and the lights are off. In the gray light from the windows, Rand is there, sitting on the floor in a dusting of cut hair. His little devil's beard is gone. His fat diamond earring gone. Mrs. Clark says, "You looked, didn't you?" The gallery owner just sits there, sprawled, legs spread on the cold concrete, looking at his hands. Mrs. Clark sits cross-legged on the floor next to him and says, "Look at my notes," she says. "Tell me I'm right." "The way the Nightmare Box works," she says, "is because the front is angled out on one side. It forces you to put your left eye against the peephole. It has a little glass fisheye lens set in a brass fitting the same kind you'd find in anyone's front door. The way the front of the box is angled, the only way you can look is with your left eye. This way, Mrs. Clark says, what you see, you have to perceive with your right brain. Whatever you see inside, it's the intuitive, emotional, instinctual side of you, the right brain part, that has to witness it. Plus, only one person can look each time. What you suffer it alone. What happens inside the nightmare box, it only happens to you. There is no one you can share it with. There's no room for someone else. Plus, the fisheye lens, she says, it warps what you see. It distorts. Plus, she says, the name engraved on the brass plate, the Nightmare Box, it tells you that you'll be scared. The name creates an expectation that you fulfill. Mrs. Clark sits and waits to be right. She sits, watching for Rand to blink. The box stands over them on its 3 legs, ticking. Rand doesn't move except his chest to breathe. On his desk near the back of the gallery, there's still Cassandra's jewelry, her little beaded purse. No, Rand says. He smiles and says, that's not it. The ticking counts down, loud in the cold quiet. You can only call the hospitals, asking if they have a girl with green eyes and no eyelashes. You can only call so many times, Mrs. Clark says, before they start to not hear you, to put you on hold, make you give up. She looks up from her thick stack of papers, her notes, and says, tell me. The antique store, it's still empty across the street. This isn't what happened, Rand says, still just looking at his hands. He says, but this is how it felt. One weekend, he had to go to a company picnic for a job he used to have, a job he hated. And as a joke, instead of food, he brought a wicker crate full of trained doves. To everyone, this was just another picnic basket, more pasta salad and wine. Rand kept the hamper under a tablecloth all morning, keeping it shaded and cool, keeping the doves inside quiet. He snuck them crumbs of French bread. He squeezed bits of corn polenta through the holes in the wicker. All morning, the people he worked with, they sipped wine or sparkling water and talked about corporate goals, mission statements, team building. At the moment when it seemed they'd all wasted a beautiful Saturday morning, that moment when all the small talk comes to an end, Rand says that's when he opened the hamper. People. These people who worked together every day, who thought they knew each other. As this white chaos, this storm, exploded up from the center of the picnic, some people screamed. People fell back into the grass. They covered their faces with their open hands. Food and wine fell. Good clothes got stained. It was the moment after, when people saw that it wouldn't hurt them. When people saw this was safe, it was the most lovely thing they'd ever seen. They fell back, too amazed to even smile. For the countless hours of that one long moment, they forgot everything important and watched the cloud of white wings twist up into the blue sky. They watched it spiral, and the spiral open, and the birds, trained by many trips, following each other away to some place they knew every time was their real home. That, Rand says, is what's inside the nightmare box. It's something that goes beyond life after death. What's in the nightmare box is proof that what we call life isn't. Our world is a dream, infinitely fake, a nightmare. One look, Rand says, and your life, your preening and struggle and worry, it's all pointless. The grandson crawling with cockroaches, the antiques dealer, Cassandra with no eyelashes wandering off naked. All your problems and love affairs, they're an illusion. What you see inside the box, Rand says, is a glimpse of the real reality. The two people still sitting there, together on the concrete gallery floor, the sunlight from the windows and the street noise, it all feels different. It could be somewhere they've never been before. It's right now. The ticking from the box. It stopped. And Mrs. Clark was too afraid to look.
Three months after Cassandra Clark disappeared, she walked back. A morning commuter driving inbound on the state highway saw a girl limping, almost naked, along the gravel shoulder. The girl seemed to be wearing a dark loincloth and dark gloves and shoes. She had on some kind of bib or a black kerchief tied around her neck and hanging down to cover her chest. By the time the driver had turned his car around and phoned for the police, by then the sun was bright enough to see the girl was actually naked. Her shoes and gloves, her loincloth and bib were just dried blood, dried thick and black, swarming and buzzing, busy with black flies. The flies crawling on her, thick as black fur. The girl's head was scraped and scabbed. Ragged tufts of hair sprouted behind her ears and around the crown of her bare head. She limped because the two small toes had been amputated from her right foot. The bib, that layer of blood on her chest, that fur of flies at the hospital emergency room, the doctors swabbed it with alcohol and found a game of tic-tac-toe carved in the skin above her breasts. The ex-player had won. When they swabbed her hands, they found the smallest finger missing from both. On the rest of her fingers, the nails had been pried up and torn away, leaving the fingertips swollen and purple. Under the dried blood, her skin was blue-white. The girl's face was the bony knobs of her chin, her cheekbones, and the ridges of her nose. At the temples and above her jawline, the skin sagged into shallowed holes. Inside the curtailed walls of the emergency room, Mrs. Clark leaned over the chrome rails of her daughter's bed and said, "Baby, oh my sweet baby, who did this to you?" Cassandra laughed and looked at the needles stuck in her arms, the clear plastic tubes stuffed into her veins, and said, "The doctors." "No," Mrs. Clark said. "Who cut off her fingers?" And Cassandra looked at her mother and said, "You think I'd let someone else do this to me?" Her laughter stopped, and she said, "I did this to myself." And that was the last time Cassandra ever laughed. The police, Mrs. Clark said, they found evidence. They found slivers of wood, thin as needles, embedded in the walls of her vagina and her anus. The police forensics people dug slivers of glass out of her cuts on her chest and arms. Mrs. Clark told her daughter that not talking wasn't an option. They needed to know every detail Cassandra could remember. The police said that whoever had done this would kidnap another victim. Unless Cassandra could face her fear and help them, her attacker would never be found. In bed, in the sunlight from a window, Cassandra lay propped up on pillows and watched birds soar back and forth in the blue sky. Her fingers wrapped big in white bandages, her chest padded with bandages. Her pencil hand only moved to draw the birds, flying back and forth. A sketch pad propped against her knees. Mrs. Clark said, "Cassandra, honey, you need to tell the police everything." If it would help, a hypnotist would come to the hospital. The caseworkers would bring anatomically detailed dolls to use in the interview. and Cassandra still watched the birds, sketching them. Mrs. Clark said, "Cassandra?" and put her hand over one of Cassandra's white-wrapped hands. And Cassandra looked at her mother and said, "It won't happen again." Looking back at the birds, Cassandra said, "At least not to me." She said, "I was a victim of myself." Outside, in the parking lot, the television news crews were setting up their satellite feeds, each van aligning the broadcast dish on its roof, ready for the toss from the studio anchor, the on-location talent holding a microphone and inserting an IFD in her ear. For 3 months, the town where they lived had stapled posters to telephone poles, each poster showing a photo of Cassandra Clark in her head cheerleader uniform, smiling and shaking her blonde hair. For 3 months, the police had questioned kids at the high school. Detectives had interviewed people who worked at the bus station, the train station, the airport. The local television and radio stations ran public service announcements that gave her weight as 110 pounds, height 5'6", green eyes, and shoulder-length hair. Search and rescue dogs sniffed her cheerleading skirt and followed a scent trail as far as a bus stop bench. State troopers and power boats dragged every pond and lake and river within a day's drive. Psychics phoned to say the girl was safe. She had eloped and gotten married, or she was dead and buried. Or she was sold into white slavery and smuggled out of the country to live in a harem of some oil magnate. Or she'd had a sex change and would be coming home as a boy soon. Or the girl was trapped in a castle of some kind. Or palace, locked inside with a group of strangers, all of them cutting themselves. That psychic wrote 2 words on a sheet of paper and sent them to Mrs. Clark. Folded inside the paper, the shaky pencil lines said, "Writer's Retreat." After 3 months, all the yellow ribbons the people had tied to their car antennas were faded to almost white, flags of surrender. Nobody paid much attention to the psychics. There were so many of them. For every Jane Doe the police found, burned or rotted or mutilated beyond identification, Mrs. Clark held her breath until dental records or DNA testing showed it wasn't Cassandra. By the 3rd month, Cassandra Clark was smiling and shaking her hair on the side of milk cartons. By then, the candlelight prayer vigils had stopped. The reward fund at the local bank branch was the only part of the case still drawing any interest. Then, a miracle. And she was limping, naked, along a highway. In her hospital bed, her skin looked purple with bruises. Her head was shaved bald. The plastic band around her wrist, it said, "C. Clark." The county medical examiner swabbed her for penis cells, which he said are long-shaped, unlike the round-shaped vaginal cells. They swabbed her for semen. The team of detectives vacuumed her scalp and hands and feet for foreign skin cells. They found fibers of blue velvet, red silk, black mohair. They swabbed the inside of her mouth and cultured the DNA in petri dishes. Police counselors came and sat at her bedside, saying how important it was that Cassandra talk out all her pain, that she speak her bitterness. The television and radio crews, the newspaper and magazine reporters sat in the parking lot, shooting their stories with the hospital window in the background. Some stepping back to film crews, filming crews, filming crews, filming her window, to show what a circus this had become, as if this was the final truth. When the nurse brought sleeping pills, Cassandra shook her head no. Just by shutting her eyes, she fell asleep. After Cassandra wouldn't talk, the police fell on Mrs. Clark, telling her about the total cost to the taxpayer for their investigation. The detectives shook their heads and said how angry and betrayed they felt, working this hard, caring this much about a girl who didn't give a rat's ass about the pain and hardship she was causing her family, her community, and her government. She had everyone weeping and praying. Everyone hated the monster who tortured her. They all wanted to see him caught and put on trial. After all their searching and effort, they deserved that much. They deserved to see her on the stand, weeping, while she described how the monster had cut off her fingers, carved her chest, shoved a wood stake up her starving ass. And Cassandra Clark just looked at the detectives lined up alongside her bed, all their faces, all their hate and rage focused on her because she wouldn't hand over another target. A bona fide real demon. The devil they needed so bad. The district attorney threatened to sue Cassandra for obstruction of justice. Her mother, Mrs. Clark, among those glaring faces. Cassandra smiled and told them, "Can't you see? You're addicted to conflict," she said. "This is my happy ending." Looking back to the window, to the birds flying past, she says, "I feel terrific." Still in the hospital, she asked for goldfish in a bowl. After that, she lay propped up in bed, watching it swim around and around, sketching it, the same way her mother watched program after television program every night. The last time Mrs. Clark went to visit, Cassandra looked away from the fish, only long enough to say, "I'm not like you anymore." She said, "I don't need to brag about my pain." And after that, Tess Clark didn't visit. If there's any trick to doing a job you hate, Mrs. Clark says it's to find a job you hate even more. After you find a bigger task to dread, the little chores will be a breeze. Here's another reason to have a devil on hand. It does make all the little demons more bearable. Another Mrs. Clark extension to the theories of Mr. Whittier. We love drama. We love conflict. We need a devil, or we'll create one. None of that is bad. It's just the way human beings operate. Fish gotta swim. Birds gotta fly. After her daughter disappeared the second time, Mrs. Clark dipped a cotton swab in a can of mineral oil and sealed the grout between each bathroom tile. It took most of a weekend. She ran a dust cloth along the narrow length of each mini blind. All those tedious jobs, for the time being, they were made bearable by the telephone call that might come. The police detectives calling to say they'd found the remains, or worse, that they'd found Cassandra alive. That girl robot who could sit all day painting the blue jays that screeched outside her window, or watch that damn goldfish swim around and around in its bowl. That stranger with her toes and fingers gone. What Mrs. Clark didn't know is the police had found Cassandra. A Cub Scout came out of the woods, not talking, quiet, with a secret. The discovery he'd found. Out looking in the woods, following a little stream up a canyon, climbing over rocks where the water pooled behind before it tipped over and dug out a pool there. This Cub Scout was looking for a hole big enough it might hold a trout. Green moss crested and ebbed along the rocks, and trees stood with branches holding each other back. In that shade, there was Cassandra Clark, stretched out on one side, her hands folded under the side of her thin, pale face as if she were asleep. Cassandra, naked, on a bed of this thick, soft moss, under where the leaves from a hawthorn tree hung down in a curtain all around. The scout tells someone adult, who calls the sheriff. Before dark, a string of detectives followed the creek up that canyon. By dark, they've gone home, a crowd of people not talking about what they saw that day at work. None of them call Mrs. Clark. At home, waiting, she turns each mattress in the house. She washes the second-floor windows. She dusts the top edge of baseboards. Every job, too miserable most times, is nothing compared to just waiting. She cleans the fireplace. The telephone never so far away she can't grab it on the first ring. This second disappearance, no one tied yellow ribbons to anything. Nobody went door to door searching or lit prayer candles. No psychics called. Not even the television stations dropped by while Mrs. Clark cleaned and cleaned. That's another night Cassandra waited in that canyon, across a stream and halfway up a rocky slope, a long carry from any Forest Service logging road. No footprints marked the path, and her bare feet looked clean, as if she'd been carried. By then, it was too late to measure the potassium in her aqueous humor. Her arms could bend, so she'd been dead longer than 2 days. Rigor mortis had come and gone. That first team of detectives, they hung a microphone in the curtain of hawthorn branches, the same way they'd mic a murder victim's grave after a recent funeral, because the killer has to come back. The killer has to talk, to tell this story until it's used up. Other stories, they use you up. To the only audience a killer can risk having, his victim. Cassandra, on her bed of moss, the microphone hanging above her, connected to a tape recorder and a transmitter broadcasting to a sheriff's deputy perched on rocks across the canyon, far enough away he can swat mosquitoes without giving himself away, the headphones over his ears, sitting on the ground crawling with ants, all the time in his earphones. Birds sing. The wind blows. You'd be amazed how many of the killers come back to say goodbye. They've shared something, the killer and the victim. And the killer will come sit at the grave and talk about old times. Everyone needs an audience. In the deputy's earphone, black flies buzz, here to lay their eggs around the damp edge of Cassandra's eyelids. Her blue lips open just a crack. The flies lay eggs inside her nose and anus. At home, Mrs. Clark has wrestled the refrigerator away from the kitchen wall so she can vacuum the compressor coils on its back. On the bed of moss, Cassandra's blood had settled to the lowest side of her, leaving the parts you can see, her breasts and hands, her face, looking painted white, her eyes open and sticky dry from the sucking tongues of insects. Her blonde hair. Her hair rolls out yellow and thick from the back of her head, but dull, the way hair looks cut off and dead on the floor in a barber shop. Her cells are digesting themselves, still trying to do some job, desperate for food. The enzymes inside her start eating through the cell walls, and the yellow within each cell starts to leak out. Cassandra's pale skin starts to slip, sliding slack over the muscle underneath. Puckering and wrinkling, the skin on her hands looks loose, baggy as cotton gloves. Her skin is marked with bumps beyond counting, a field of what could be tiny knife scars, every bump moving, grazing between skin and muscle. Every bump the larva of a black fly, eating the thin layer of subcutaneous fat, tunneling just under her skin. The entire surface of her arms and legs, a constellation of moving lumps. In the deputy's headphones, the buzz of flies gives way to the crackle of grubs tunneling forward one bite at a time. At home, a step from the silent telephone, Mrs. Clark sorts Christmas decorations in the choking dust of the attic, throwing out and repacking, labeling each box. The bacteria inside Cassandra's lungs, the bacteria in her guts, in her mouth and nose, they split and split and split without white blood cells to stop them. They gobble the subcutaneous fat and the yellow protein leaking from her ruptured cells. Their numbers explode, bloating her pale stomach until her shoulders are forced back. Her legs are splayed open. Cassandra's belly swells tight, pregnant with a gas inside, the universe of bacteria eating and reproducing. Her tongue swells, forcing her jaws apart and jutting out between her lips, swollen big as bicycle tires. The bacteria tunneled through the top of her mouth, breaking into the cranial vault where her brain waits, soft and edible. At home, Mrs. Clark carries the phone from room to room, scrubbing walls and washing the glass filled with dead houseflies covering each ceiling light. After another day, Cassandra's brain would bubble, red and brown, out her ears and nose. The soft mass of it would melt and bubble out the sockets where her eyes have collapsed. The microphone picks up the sound. Think of popcorn muted inside a microwave oven. Imagine slipping into hot water filled with bubble bath. The steady sound when all those bubbles burst. It's the sound of hard rain on a concrete patio. Hail hitting the roof of a car. That's the sound of maggots. By this time, thick as white rice. The microphone picks up a rip and a squeal. The sound of skin coming apart and Cassandra's guts going flat. Meat-eating beetles arrive. Mice and magpies. Birds singing in the forest, each string of notes bright as colored lights. A woodpecker listens with his head cocked to hear the insects inside a tree. He knocks to peck a hole. The skin slides down, draped over bones, as Cassandra's guts leak away, soaking into the ground, leaving just this shadow of skin, this framework of bones mired in a puddle of her own mud. In the sheriff's deputy's earphones, the mice munched the beetles. Snakes arrived to swallow the squealing mice. Everything looking to be last in the food chain. At home, Mrs. Clark sorted through the papers in her daughter's room, inside her desk drawers. The letters written on pink stationery, the old birthday cards, and, written in pencil, copied in Cassandra's handwriting on a sheet of lined notebook paper. The ragged perforations running up one side, a note said, "Writer's Retreat. Abandon your life for 3 months." As she flushed her daughter's goldfish down the toilet, still alive. Then Mrs. Clark pulled on her winter coat. That night, in the deputy's headphones, a woman's voice said, "Is this where you went? This writer's retreat? Is this where they tortured you?" It was the voice of Mrs. Clark saying, "I'm sorry, but you should have stayed missing. When you came back, you weren't the same." She says, "I loved you so much more when you were gone." Tonight, telling her story to the rest of us in the blue velvet lobby, Mrs. Clark said, "I did it with sleeping pills." Sitting halfway up in the wide blue stairs, she says, "The moment I saw the microphone hanging there, I ran." That night in the canyon, she could already hear the sheriff's deputy crashing through the brush, coming to arrest her. She never went back to that clean house, with all those jobs she hated to do, done. With nothing in the world but her winter coat and her purse, Mrs. Clark called the number on Cassandra's handwritten note. She met Mr. Whittier, and she met the rest of us. Her eyes moving from our bandaged hands and feet, to our ragged hair, to our hollow cheeks, Mrs. Clark said, "I never was his anything. I never loved Whittier." Mrs. Clark says, "I just wanted to know what happened to my daughter." Really, it was Mr. Whittier who killed the girl she'd given birth to. She says, "I only ever wanted to know why."